Hello, here we are again. Daniel, my nephew, Thomas, my husband, and myself, ready to continue exploring wisdom by design, as we did in our first episode last week. Today, I'm going to do a short review of what we covered, and I'm going to focus on the R of the R.E.A.L method, rituals. Why it is that rituals can help us cultivate wisdom. In our first episode, I introduced wisdom by design, the idea that design is a very important human activity that we have somehow relegated to the activity of architects or graphic designers, but at the end, we all participate in design because we design our lives, the way our families live, the way we experience being in the world. We have the capacity of designing from the little things like what to cook for our family, to bigger things like what practices are we going to incorporate in our lives, if we want to meditate, if we want to cultivate kindness, etc. Design is different from science that cultivates the truth, is different from art that cultivates beauty, and is the human activity that cultivates the good. What is good for the particular design that we are doing right now? And because of focusing on the good, it allows us the opportunity, affords us the opportunity of focusing on one thing at a time, what is good right now. And for then, from that particular focus, then grow. That's why at the Wisdom Project, we invite people to tackle difficult challenges, thinking that if you solve that particular challenge, you can then apply what you have learned, the tools that you are using, the artifacts, to call them in their formal name, things created by humans, like a ritual, for instance, or a particular tool or concept. How can you apply that particular tool in another project? So we move like designers, one project at a time. A designer of a good child, somebody who is raising a child, you cannot focus on the good of humanity. You focus on the good of one child. And one step at a time, you develop what you want, the good of that particular relationship. So we covered the strategy of wisdom by design. I introduced the concept of the R.E.A.L method, ritual engagement with artifacts, with man-made created things, concepts, techniques, procedures, tools. R.E.A.L engagement with artifacts in the pursuit of the liminal. What is the liminal? The liminal is the state of transition that we experience when we go from being an adolescent to being an adult, from when we go from being single to being married, or from being married to being divorced. Is the space of change and transition that sometimes becomes very turbulent. We experience anxiety, and then we want to go back to the stability that that you enjoyed before. But if we want to cultivate wisdom, we need to embark in the pursuit of that transition. Why? Because today we are confronted with difficult challenges that have been identified as wicked problems because they are difficult to define, they are difficult to understand. When you start solving them, you discover things that were not visible before. So you have to go, as we do in design, one step at a time, trying all the time to understand the problem. So it's very much needed to have this wisdom by design approach and the R.E.A.L method to tackle current wicked problems as we cultivate wisdom. I also mentioned in the first episode that we own a great depth to the work of John Vervaeke, and the framework that we're going to be using and I will be presenting in future episodes is an adaptation of what he presents in his series, Awakening the Meaning Crisis, as the skills that have to be developed if you want to cultivate wisdom. And what is wisdom? We also said wisdom has been defined in many different ways. And the model of wisdom that we are using is based on an agreement that 10 different wisdom researchers achieved in the year 2020. They published a paper where they presented what is called the common model of wisdom, a model that says that grounded in a moral commitment and in personal and social experiences, people pursue something called perspectival metacognition, which is the ability to acknowledge, to be humble, to acknowledge the limitations of our own knowledge. Second, the ability to accept the ambiguity of some challenges, like the wicked problems of today, the epidemic of loneliness, the epidemic of depression, the challenges of climate change, the doubts about how it is that we are going to incorporate in society the new tools of artificial intelligence, etc. So we need to accept then humbly that we don't have everything, all the knowledge needed. Second, that there will be ambiguity, uncertainty, that it's impossible to have all the answers at the beginning. That's why we need to approach wisdom by design and not as a science or as artists only. The third element of this common wisdom model is that we have to acknowledge different perspectives. We all know the story of the 4 blind men who were invited to touch an elephant, and each one of them described a different area of the elephant, and therefore it looked like they were describing something different. So that happens a lot with wicked problems. Therefore, wisdom is about accepting those multiple perspectives. And finally, it's the ability to synthesize and integrate those. That's the model of wisdom that we are pursuing and that we will keep exploring in subsequent episodes. And before I start presenting the real method R, the ritual, I want to invite Daniel and Tom to make a comment about the summary I just presented or any other question they have about what we have been talking about.
I'm curious as to, and I think this is a question that you were gonna follow up with anyway. But I'm curious as to what exactly is a ritual defined as, like what's the difference between a ritual and like a routine?
Okay. And you, Tomas, you have any comments?
Well, I mean, kind of on the same lines, very interesting about this particular episode, the discussion about ritual, because I think everybody has their own interpretation of what a ritual is. So it's going to be interesting to see the perspective from the Wisdom Project, how that all kind of comes in together.
Okay. So, all right. Hopefully, at the end of this session, we will be practicing or at least introducing a family ritual that the 3 of us like practicing. Perhaps if we can weekly, but if not, we do it at least twice a month, which is the mindful conversation ritual that we have dinner. That's a ritual, getting together in the middle of the week to be together. Daniel lives close by, and so we get together, we have dinner, and then we have a mindful conversation, which is one of the tools that are very much present in the Wisdom Project, a tool that helps us develop different perspectives and integrate them. So that's our family ritual. Cooking together, Daniel copies the recipes because he wants to learn to be a good chef. Then we cook, then we eat, then we clear the table, and then we sit in the living room and we have a conversation, which I will explain how is that different from a debate or a discussion. The mindful conversation is a dialogue where we invite each other to bring forth more of what we knew before, to bring forth our wisdom. So let's start with Daniel's question. What is the difference between a ritual or a routine? Every morning we wake up, we go to the bathroom, use the toilet, flush the toilet, then brush our teeth, and then go into the kitchen to prepare tea or coffee. That's a routine. the routine can become so ingrained and so important that if there are little deviations from that, we get irritated. So we could say that that routine has become almost like a ritual for us because it has not only the meaning of going to the bathroom, flushing the toilet, brushing your teeth, doing the coffee, but it has become important for us. It has more meaning than the meaning of a routine. It has become our way of centering ourselves into our day. If the coffee that we tend to buy is not there, if the coffee press that we use is broken, that routine can be shattered. And depending on how we experience it, we could say, oh, that's more than a routine. That's kind of like a ritual. We tend not to see the many rituals that we practice. Ritual, we think of them as being part of practicing a religion, like the ritual of baptism, the ritual of communion, the ritual of marriage in Christianity, for instance, the different rituals that different religions present. But in our secular lives, we also have rituals. We get together for Thanksgiving, and there is a series of movements and procedures that we have to follow when we get together. In every family, even though they all get together for Thanksgiving, they have different ways of embodying, of incorporating, of practicing that particular ritual. Some families also get together for Christmas or New Year's Eve and have different ways of doing it. Because I am originally from South America, I still don't get used to the fact that people don't value staying together for New Year's Eve. So we have the benefit of a friend who organizes a big New Year's Eve party like we do in South America for all of us. That's the difference between then a ritual and a routine. Another element of difference between a ritual and a routine is that sometimes a ritual doesn't have a purpose. Or if it does, you cannot clearly see what the purpose is. How many times you get together with your family for dinner, even with your extended family, but it's not special. You don't care too much if cousin Ali didn't come to the dinner that I organized, but we do care if she fails to come for Christmas. We do care if she fails to come to a wedding. So we have many rituals that besides the instrumental role they have, like getting together to eat, have symbolic meaning. And that's what makes ritual different from a routine. In both cases, there are bodily activities like brushing my teeth, or if I'm cooking, or if I am dancing, or if I'm hunting. There are a series of bodily postures and positions that are expected to be taken. But in the case of ritual, there is an extra added layer, which is this symbolic meaning. When we practice ritual in religion, the idea of the ritual is to connect with the sacred, to connect with what is beyond current reality. If we practice it in our regular secular lives, we are pursuing something that is beyond the concrete goal of the gathering. Let's see if you can think of examples or if you want to challenge that definition of ritual.
So Iris, so what I'm hearing you saying that a routine is something that we just do automatically on a repetitive way, certain way of doing things. So for example, at work, I get up, I get dressed, I drive to work. When I come to the office, the first thing I do is I plug in my computer, my laptop, I log in, I go to the kitchen, I fill up my water jugs. Then I make sure that all the coffee cups are there. If anything missing, I kind of restock whatever I've I'm able to restock at that point, do my coffee. I have to, it's 2 Keurig cups of coffee for each cup, then my little bit of milk, and I go then back to my desk and I sit down and then embrace the day. So what I'm hearing you say that is a routine. It's my routine, my daily routine of things I do, because it does not provide any special meaning, or there's not a specific purpose to that. If there were, that would be then a ritual. So ritual, basically, it's a routine that has a specific objective at the end, an experience, an insight, or something like that. Am I more or less understanding?
Yeah. It's, and the purpose is more than the concrete preparing coffee or the concrete doing what I'm supposed to do at work. It has symbolic meaning. It becomes important just by the fact that you are practicing it. You are trying to reach to something else.
Because when I hear the word ritual, I mean, initially, I always attribute that towards religious practices from different religions. So I guess my question is, what would be a ritual that it's not necessarily religious? But I guess we would have to define what does it mean to be religious?
Okay, no, we don't have, I think that what makes the routine a ritual is its symbolic aspect, not the practical thing of I brush my teeth to clean them because I want them clean, or I drink coffee because I want to be awake in the morning. The ritual has extra meaning, an extra layer of meaning, of importance. It brings us into contact with the mysteriousness of life. We give it more importance. And so I'm going to invite you to, because we practice mindful conversation as a ritual, what is that we get when we sit together in a dialogue that we call a mindful conversation? And how is that different from the routine conversation that we tend to have, every day at work with our friends, etc.?
So going back to that, I mean, you mentioned that earlier. For our ritual is when we get together with Dan, he comes over, we prepare a delicious meal. So I think there's a sense of gratification of eating something delicious that we prepare at the moment. So there's some gratification from that perspective. But then we also know that after that meal, as you mentioned, we sit down and we have our mindful conversation, which it's true. It's not like a regular discussion about things or talking about a topic. No, a mindful conversation is a tool that allows us to really have a profound dialogue. It could be something that Danny may bring up, something that I may bring up, and something that you may bring up, that basically you just want to be heard and allow the enrichment of the thought process to generate insight. So I can see that being a ritual where at the end of the day is not just the satisfaction of the delicious meal, but also at the end of the mindful conversation, having been able to generate insight about whatever was either troubling me or what I was thinking about or whatever I wanted to discuss and wanted to be heard. Is that kind of in the right line of thought?
Daniel, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, from my paradigm, the significance of the mindful conversation, from the way I see it, comes from first breaking the framework that we usually use to communicate with each other. In any normal conversation, we're usually in the autopilot or the mode of thinking that we're just going with whatever comes first to mind. We're saying whatever flows with the conversation, and that's the natural way we communicate with 99% of the time, right? So in the mindful conversation, we're forced to completely break that dynamic, first of all, and it feels like, at least I feel like I'm able to enter into perhaps a more authentic, I want to say authentic version or perhaps introspective way of communicating, like where I'm able to present an idea that it feels, kind of a deeper or, more significant, I suppose, to the things I'm thinking about, as opposed to, what went on with the weather yesterday. It's more like, oh, why do I feel a certain way about this thing? So the significance for me is I'm able to understand more about myself and the ways that I'm thinking due to that breaking of the framework. So my question would be, that feels inherent to mindful conversation. So that significance of being able to understand myself due to mindful conversation, where is the line between that and the significance of the ritual? Because I'm trying to understand, why are rituals so significant? The mindful conversation feels significant because I'm able to understand myself. So where is the line there?
Okay, you just said that mindful conversation is significant.
Yes.
Yes, very much. Mindful conversation, the way that we practice it, it's a ritual. We even have particular chairs in the living room where we like to sit, yes or no? And
Yes.
when we talk about a past mindful conversation, we remember, yes, I was sitting in the blue sofa and I was sitting like this. Don't we do that?
Yeah.
Heightened awareness of a ritual.
Oh.
That's the practice of the R.E.A.L method. Ritualistic engagement with an artifact. What artifact? This particular tool called the mindful conversation. For what? For what? Almost like a religious purpose, Thomas. You were talking about the difference between the ritual and why, because when religion does that, the baptism, the communion, the marriage, and any other religious ritual, basically is a rite of passage. You are a divorce, a funeral. You are offering the participants a way of getting into a new state. The state of being married, for instance, the state of having your commitment to this particular religion through the communion. And the way we practice it here in the Wisdom Project, in Wisdom by Design, is trying to reach that state of transition. That liminal is a technical term. We use the tools in a ritualistic way to reach what Daniel just called breaking my frame. You see, that's the liminal. We sit together in ritual. And next, I'm going to describe for those who are listening what is the mindful conversation all about. It's easy to practice, and we're going to share with them, how to do it. But we sit in conversation and slowly start discovering new things, discovering insights, or breaking our frames, which I understand, Daniel, correct me, that what you mean by that is that you used to see it in one way and now you see it in another way.
Yeah, and also, I suppose, the one way would be the way that I naturally sit, and the other way is the way specific to the ritual. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that basically the ritual is a way of doing things in order to achieve a particular experience. Because one of the things that comes to mind with the mindful conversation, yes, we talked about what I can perceive at the end of that ritual, which is an insight and so forth. But part of the ritual is, okay, how do we achieve that? It's not, we talked about earlier, not about a regular conversation where maybe what I'm used to is expecting people to give me advice to solve the problem and things like that. The ritual in this particular tool or technique is really kind of based on active listening, where the listener is not going to give advice anything. It's trying to work towards enriching that dialogue that the speaker is doing in order to provide input to generate a greater insight. So the ritual is not a regular conversation. That's what I'm really kind of getting to it now. It's not a regular conversation. It's a way of dialoguing, a way of speaking that will enhance or provide the insight. And that's the ritual. The ritual is the way, the steps of doing things. Like in the baptism, these are the steps you need to follow. When you go to mass, these are the things that are going to happen, that are going to generate a particular. Am I in the right
Yeah,
train of thought here?
It produces a shared consciousness that prepares us for a transitional state, for some type of change. Could be the change understanding that Daniel was talking about, could be the new perspectives that the common model of wisdom that I quoted at the beginning is looking for when we develop wisdom. But the mindful conversation then becomes a tool to cultivate wisdom. Why? Because it allows us to cultivate different perspectives.
And I just want to add on, from the way I understand it now, it seems that the rituals are significant because, we as humans are little, our brains are in little boxes trying to understand a ton of sensory data using, only limited pattern recognition to understand everything, right? So when you're put in a ritual or a situation that has constricted variables where, it's going to be similar every time, so your brain doesn't have to be understanding, or your brain can focus on the thing at hand instead of the changing variables. So for example, the mindful conversation, when we're all in the same place every time, we know exactly what to expect. So we're able to focus deeper on the thing at hand, which is the mindful conversation, which allows us to produce, more insight or a deeper conversation or whatever it is. So that's how I'm understanding it now.
Yeah, or different perspectives, gain a different
Sure.
perspective that you could think, oh, I broke the frame. Now I saw it this way, and now I see it this way. Just by talking to each other in a different format. In what format? The format of a particular ritual. So we have basically relegated to religion the practice of formal rituals, like I've been talking about communion and baptism, but we also do it in daily life. We do the routine of preparing the coffee. We do the routine of shaking hands when we agree with somebody. We do the routine of getting an agenda for different meetings. But when we have this extra layer, the symbolic meaning, the routine can become a ritual. And as an example, in the last few years in business, people like me who do management consultancy and help organizations be more efficient, have been practicing what is called agile rituals. Agile rituals is a way of designing products, engineering products, quick, with certain criteria of design, start small, have quick feedback, be humble, and be willing to discover new dimensions of your problem. It's a list of criteria of design that are applied in agile thinking in organizations to reduce cost in the development of products, to maximize the productivity of teams. And this way of doing it becomes a ritual. People start giving a lot of symbolism to just the practice. Some people have become so rigid, like practicing a religious ritual, because they do stand-up meetings every morning. People have to stand for 10 minutes and share things. And people who do not feel comfortable, feel shy to complain because it's a rigidity in the application of the ritual model. So is there anything that pops into your mind vis-a-vis the idea of ritual?
I mean, you mentioned the agile ritual, and at work, I basically have incorporated that in what we call our boot camp training, where we meet pretty much on a regular basis for 10, 15 minutes, see where we are, what needs to be done, what corrective steps need to happen to ensure at the end of the day success. Success, not just on a weekly, but on a monthly basis and throughout the 3-month boot camp. So in a way, I can see that as being a ritual that, yes, we kind of, it's not a routine. I mean, because we generate insight every time we come together for that, call it the stand-up meeting. So yes, I definitely have been able to apply that in the work environment. I'm not so sure if I would call it a ritual, because if I call it a ritual again, people will go, "What are you talking about?" Okay, so I call it more, the methodology rather than a ritual, a way of doing things to achieve something to that effect. But yeah, it's definitely applicable. And the other thought that comes to mind, I mean, obviously we mentioned religion, but I remember years back when I went to college, I did a study about the Native Americans in the Amazon jungle. And I mean, they're not a religious organization per se, but they have their rituals. They have the rituals in the evenings. They have the ritual when somebody passes. That it's not just for a few hours, especially when somebody passes. Those rituals, they last for weeks and so forth. So, and when you look at, some of the other cultures around the world, it's not necessarily religious, but it's a way of them doing things. So it's very interesting.
A way of doing things that go beyond the instrumental, go beyond the purpose is to get together to review the goals of this particular project. It becomes part of what we do, what we are. A sociologist called Pierre Bourdieu years ago called it the habitus. Not only the habit, he named it in Latin, the habitus, that he observed how so many families of immigrants coming to France in the 1960s, after one generation, they repeated behaviors that were foreign to French culture and that could be identified or characteristic of the culture where the people came from Alger, for instance, or from Egypt. You could see the difference in the practice of the ritual that people followed. So the idea here in the Wisdom Project, in Wisdom by Design, is to embrace this idea of ritual, meaning we do things, we do routines, because we getting together for dinner and a mindful conversation, we could say, is a routine. But we do it with a lot of seriousness, with a lot of symbolism. And we discuss if we're going to cancel it. I was telling Daniel last week that I used to say that I'd rather work with people 27 years old and up because of many experiences teaching in college or working with a lot of people in many projects and thinking, usually if you are younger, you need more supervision, but Daniel is being so responsible. So yesterday he said, okay, I cannot meet on Monday. He said, I cannot meet on Wednesday. Can we meet on Thursday? So he's planning because it has become more than a just get together to eat and talk.
Iris, I mean, I know we're kind of referring it to quite a bit to food. So would you say that come Christmas, when we make the famous hallacas, those Venezuelan Christmas tamales, is that considered a ritual?
Yeah, and when we were new in Boston, the two of us, and Daniel's family was yet to move to Boston, our way of celebrating Christmas is that Christmas Eve, the 24th, I went and bought all the ingredients and we prepared hallacas as part of the ritual of Christmas and feeling that we are part of a larger community of Venezuelans, even though we were alone and didn't know anybody. That's the ritual of being Venezuelan, yes. And the same, our friend Jose, who organizes the New Year's party and invites so many people, it's a ritual of Venezuelanship, of being from the place where we are.
So would you say then that a ritual is something that happens in occasions? versus a routine, which is something you do continuously. Is that a fair statement?
No, every day I brush my teeth, every day I wake up, I go to the bathroom, flush the toilet, brush my teeth. Is the symbolism, is that added layer. That
Okay.
is not just a meal, it's not just a gathering, it's something more. Let's see, Daniel, could you think of how could you have made a ritual of the experience of getting with your friends this past Memorial Day?
I'm pressed to think of how that could be a ritual. I don't know. I don't see any symbolic significance in anything that we did. We just kind of hung out and had fun. But I would say a ritual that, I think the closest thing I do to a ritual, and I think it's still getting there, is my morning routine where I work out, which is a change that I had made in order to become a better person. So I would say the symbolism there is doing it every day is reaching towards the higher goal of changing and becoming someone, the person that I aspire to be. So that I would call a ritual.
All right. So you are making your morning routine a ritual of getting you into a liminal area, a transitional area of becoming the person you want to be.
Exactly.
So it has more meaning than just waking up and doing some push-ups or playing with the dumbbells.
Yes.
Now, Danny, you mentioned earlier that last weekend you climbed a mountain twice. Now, it was not a routine because it was not the same experience the first time. The second time, I know you changed something up to experience something else.
That's true. I didn't think of that.
So I think going up to the second time at a different time of the day to experience, in this case, you mentioned the sunrise. I think it created it had a meaning, it had a different experience at the time. Am I fair to say that?
I would say absolutely. That's the perfect example that I didn't think of. Yeah, because the first time we did it, we were at the mountain, we had to hike up the mountain. That's why we're there, right? The second time though, it was just me and two of my other friends that went up, and we had already seen the top of the mountain. We climbed up the whole thing. We went down the whole thing. We went up the second time we went up the same trail, so there was nothing new. But yeah, it was I suppose. I can't put a word on what was symbolic there, but we did it. We woke up at 3 a.m. to go up, and it was a tough climb because we had to do it in under an hour to make it to the top. So I suppose one of the goals was to see the sunrise, but that's not really a significant goal. So I'm lacking the vocabulary to say what was the symbolism there. But I think you're absolutely right. There was something there that made it a ritual, some kind of ritual.
So the invitation that I'm presenting in the Wisdom Project and through the strategy of Wisdom by Design is that these rituals are available to us all the time. We have had them forever since our shamans in our primitive communities got together around the fire to invoke the spirits to help them have a good hunt or a mild winter or to save the life of a child. And because we have lost the presence of religion in many cases or relegated to religion the management of rituals, we do the ritual of marriage, the ritual of communion, the ritual of baptism, and that's it. Forgetting that we in our lives can do rituals. And if we are in the pursuit of wisdom and we want to cultivate wisdom, we purposely have the possibility of using rituals to bring us to a new place, to this liminal, transformational space of being that new person that you want to be, Daniel.
I want to say for the mountain, your phrases there that you said in your sentences made me think that the significance of climbing up the mountain the second time was to combat against the idea that my other friends were vying, which was we're in Vermont, but they were staying at home playing video games while we were hiking the mountain the first time. So it was kind of it felt like a push towards, we're here and there's no reason not to do this. So do it just to do it. Just because we want to be the type of people that, even when we're given the option to do nothing, we want to be the type of people that just do it just so we can do it, right? So I would say that's my answer for the symbolism. That's fine.
Yeah, that's what ritual has, more than instrumental purpose, more than I'm brushing my teeth because I want my teeth clean. I'm preparing my coffee because I want to wake up in the morning. It has this symbolism, this meaning. I want to be a better human being. Therefore, I have my morning routine of exercise, and I can do this again, climbing the mountain, waking up at 3:30 a.m. because I can do it, because I want to be best. So that's the sense of ritual. The engineers who get together every morning and do the stand-up ritual, agile ritual in organizations, they are trying to go beyond, what are you doing? What are you going to do today? What did you do yesterday? They want to create a sense of community, a sense of intersubjectivity. How are we together creating something else? And that's the meaning of rituals. We're going to have a grandchild at the end of the fall, in October, and our son was talking about, are we going to do a baptism because they are not practicing? And so they were discussing what type of ritual, even though they don't use the word. So I Googled, how Americans do it besides the baby shower. And then I got the idea of a naming ceremony that they do after the baby is born, a naming ceremony that I'm not used to it. And then so I texted my daughter-in-law and said, would you like, instead of an extra baby shower that I could organize because she already has one, friend planning one, to do a naming ceremony, and I can invite one of my pastor's friends. I have 2 friends who are pastors, to do the ceremony. And she was, yes, she was delighted. She was delighted with the opportunity to do something ceremonial, something special, something symbolic to celebrate the birth of the child when he's going to be like 3-4 weeks old. So any idea on how to incorporate ritual in your lives before we go into describing what the mindful conversation ritual is all about?
In my case, I think I got plenty of rituals that I do. Whenever I do something at the end, is to kind of sit back and reflect upon it and create that sense of honest, of awareness, of communion and things like that. So I think in my lifetime, I've incorporated many different rituals that I like to do that kind of feed my persona, my spirit. So yes.
So I mentioned rite of passage. Rituals in their symbolic power help us go through changes. The change of marriage, the change of divorce, the change of communion, or the change of becoming a different person. One that follows his or her commitments, like Daniel, you're trying to do. Okay? So now I'm going to transition to explain what is mindful conversation and why is it a ritual. I think I gave a little of it already, but mindful conversation is different from a regular conversation because it's not a debate. When you do a debate, you want to be right. You present a point of view and you try to argue against any person that says that you are wrong. So it's not this type of conversation. It's not a debate. It's not a discussion because it's not that you present a point of view and then people ask questions. A mindful conversation is a dialogue. It's an invitation of intersubjective conversation. You talk, I listen, and I try to see what is missing and how to enrich what you just said. And when you talk and I do that, then I give you an invitation to continue trying to explain yourself. And then I repeat what you just said and try to see if there are ways in which I can make it grow. The mindful conversation is a dialogue. There are many types of dialogue. Socrates, the Greek philosopher, used to engage in dialogues. There are many people cultivating dialogue today. John Vervaeke, that I have mentioned, is developing what he calls dialectics into dialogos, and he runs wonderful workshops doing that. He works with Guy Sentok of the Circling Institute in San Francisco they also run different types of dialogue. At the Center for Nonviolent Communication, which is now a worldwide organization that has really helped solve many difficult conflicts around the world, they practice a different form of dialogue. There are many types of dialogue. In the Wisdom Project, I have chosen a particular type that we call the mindful conversation because it's very simple. It's since we get together for 1 2-hour session with the Wisdom Project, people are able to engage in mindful conversation and then practice it as a homework by themselves with participants in the program, with peers. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, I invite them to do mindful dialogue with their families, with their friends, and they're able to do it. So if you do research on how to practice dialogue, you're going to find many, many options. But the one that we practice at the Wisdom Project as a core artifact, as a core tool of what we do to cultivate wisdom, it's an adaptation of the work of Tanya Singer. She's a social affective neuroscientist. She studies the neuroscience of affect, of social affect. And she has done studies using this particular technique that she calls intersubjective meditation, because it's like meditating, but with the other. She also calls it meditating together. If you Google Tanya Singer, meditating together, you're going to see a little video where she explains what is that they do. And in the Wisdom Project, we do that with little changes based in all the other versions of dialogue, because we add an element of a third person in the group that is going to complement whatever the two main actors are doing. And then we rotate among each other. Would you like to share something about mindful conversation?
Well, just from the mindful conversation, I mean, you mentioned about actors. So you mentioned there are 3. So there's the speaker, the listener, and the observer. And can you explain a little bit more? I mean, how is the dynamic in the mindful conversation between those 3 actors?
Okay. If I am the listener, I ask Danielle, how do you plan to incorporate in a more formal way ritual in your life after today's conversation, Danielle? Danielle is the speaker, he will answer, and then I will ask him questions to complement, and then we go back and forth. And then Thomas, you are the observer, you will enrich whatever we did, including describing our body language. So we close the conversation. This is very simple.
I mean, you as the listener, I mean, you mentioned just ask question, but earlier you mentioned about paraphrasing, repeating to make sure. So isn't part of the objective too for the speaker to be felt that I'm heard? I expressed what I wanted to express. So so that's also, I guess, part of the role of the listener, correct?
Yes. When the listener has to end the conversation by asking, do you feel understood? because the three elements of dialogue are that we are all equal in the conversation. We're not going to try to impose anything to the other, that we are being listened to, and then that we're going to be asked questions that would reveal new ideas, not only to the person who is being asked, but to the whole group. Those are three elements that have been common in all the studies of dialogue. There is a person called Daniel Yankenovich who wrote a book more than 20 years ago called The Magic of Dialogue, and he uses dialogue for important political conversations. And throughout the analysis of many, many different dialogues, he came out with these very three basic things. In equal footing, all the participants are listening with empathy, honoring the other. And then the purpose of the conversation is to unveil, discover assumptions.
Now, Iris, can you provide some guidance? Because the natural pattern when we're a listener is to kind of jump in and start giving advice. And I know that's not part of the mindful conversation. What kind of guidance can you provide to people that would like to practice that when that need comes up to give advice based on what the speaker is saying, to kind of come back and listen and listen? Could you provide some guidance to that?
Okay. You both have participated in at least 30 mindful conversations. Not only here, the three of us, but you both have done twice the Wisdom Project fundamentals training, and you have done the homework. And since day one, when we get together, everybody knows how to do it without me explaining it, without me putting a lot of ideas on how to do it, a lot of concepts. You just go into it with the intention of listening without interrupting. And when the other person pauses, we just repeat what we heard. We paraphrase. And then when we finish paraphrasing, the speaker can say, oh, you missed saying this and that. Or listening to me, to you paraphrasing me, I got into this other idea that I failed to mention. And then we go back and forth, the speaker explaining himself or herself, the listener paraphrasing, and then also asking questions. Noticing that, oh, you forgot to mention this or that, and asking questions. Not questions born of the experience of the listener, questions based on what the speaker said. And in this back and forth, people discover new ideas, people discover insight. And all these people that I mentioned, Guy Sentok, John Verbicki, the people of Authentic Relating, I have done work with Taylor Barrett from Authentic Relating Toronto. It's a different type of practice of dialogue. My favorite is this Tanya Singer model that you can find on the web, and it's very, very basic, so easy to do. So basically, it's meditating together, listening to the other the same way you listen to yourself when you are meditating. Comments or questions?
All right. So yeah, you talked about the mindful conversation, which ties us back to the R of the R.E.A.L model, the ritual. So mindful conversation is a means to create a ritual for yourself with others in order to gain insight.
It's a ritual that creates intersubjectivity, I would say.
Okay.
We feel understood. I think we have 10 more minutes. Daniel, Thomas, would you feel like doing a little mindful conversation?
All right, so we're going to be demoing a mindful conversation. In this exercise, Iris will be the speaker, Danny will be the listener, and I will be the observer. So we're going to do one round to kind of demonstrate how a mindful conversation works. Typically, we like to start off with just kind of centering our thoughts kind of disconnecting a little bit from the day to day. And then we'll go then right in and Danny asking the question. So if we assume a nice position, kind of sitting straight up, both feet on the floor, hands on the thighs, and just taking a kind of a deep breath and kind of feeling that air going in and out of our lungs and exhaling and inhaling. So we'll take about 30 seconds to kind of center ourselves. Deep breath and exhale. Deep breath and exhale. Deep breath and exhale. And when we're ready, Danny, feel free to ask the questions to Iris.
Iris, how do you aspire to be a better person?
Well, my answer is that I not only aspire, but I really try. Well, yeah, aspire and try and live and be a better person, moment by moment. Like, I didn't want to visit my mom this morning. I'd rather do something else. And I just went into the car and drove there and had a nice visit. And we were coming back, and suddenly a thought came in of criticizing somebody else. And then I immediately chose not to go that route, criticizing somebody. And then I made a comment about how good it was that in my family, without even making it explicit, we work towards being kind and gentle to each other and to the extended family instead of enjoying gossip and bad thinking. So how do I aspire to be a better person? By being it, moment by moment. The question reminds me of a story written by Clayton Naikana, my friend from Australia, my friend Clayton. The story is called The Village of Me's, and he writes about so many ways in which he could respond differently to a situation, and then he sees the possibility of doing A, but then he chooses to be B. He sees the possibility of being C, but then he chooses and acts like D. So it's constant vigilance, but it's a kind of soft vigilance. Ellen Langer, one of the first psychologists who wrote about mindfulness in the States, in the United States, she's was a professor at Harvard, Ellen Langer. She talks about soft vigilance. It's this softness, this vigilance, but in softness, that helps me navigate my aspiration towards a better self.
Okay. So I heard you say that in aspiring to be a better person, you acted moment to moment. So you gave an example of visiting your mom, even though you wanted to do something else, and not choosing to follow a negative thought, and instead going with something else. And you said that those are family. I believe you said those are family values that have that you were raised with within your family to, instead of gossiping, talking bad, perhaps just think of something else. And then you went on to talk about, I believe I'm missing something in between that and Clayton's story of the village of Mies, but I'll continue. The village of Mies, I believe it was there was a whole village of everybody's Clayton, and they all chose a different path. So he's able to select which one, and you said that you use that as a strategy to make or to rationalize which decision to take, to try to see it in a framework, so it's easier for you to see, for you to decide. And then you went on to talk about soft vigilance as a strategy to maintaining your aspiration to be a good person. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what do you mean by soft vigilance?
Well, the piece that you missed is perhaps because I started talking about it and didn't. It's been very lucky to have been raised in a family where there are not too many tensions between the family members and the extended families, the extended family. Because I remember I was your age when I spent a few days with the family of my boyfriend, and there was so much gossip against the people who were not at a particular place with us. And then that made me conscious that in my family, that was not the case. So I was lucky that I didn't have to make a choice because it was not in me. So this morning, when I was coming back, there was the possibility of making a negative comment, and I stopped it. And then I thought, oh, I'm so lucky because this is the way I was raised. It's natural for me, but it's not always natural. Like this morning, I rather did something else, went for a walk, slept a little. I could have slept a little later, but instead I woke up, went to the supermarket, did some shopping for my mom, and then went to visit her and enjoy my visit. So it's about, sometimes it comes naturally, but sometimes it doesn't. And it's about understanding that we are, like Clayton says, a village of me. So many me's that could arise at any moment, but I choose which one is the one that is going to manifest itself. And in that sense, the way to live by your aspiration of being a better person is to practice what Ellen Langer calls soft vigilance. To be cognizant, to have what is called metacognition, awareness of your own being, to make the choice.
Okay, so I heard that you explained that the decision to be a good person in terms of gossip was, in terms of not gossiping, was granted to you by your, beautiful and loving family who never did that. So perhaps that's an easier choice for you to make. And then you went on and you how soft vigilance helps you choose to make the decision that you want to do.
Yeah, you are frozen. Your video is frozen, Daniel. Okay, now it's better. Now, yeah, that's what I was. And when I hear you paraphrasing what I said, it brings to mind the fact that soft vigilance allows you to break patterns, like, like I admired Thomas in the sense that he never leaves anything for tomorrow. If he has to do something, that's it, he does it. So for him, it's not difficult. But for me, sometimes when we were coming back, he wanted to stop for gas, and I'm like, oh no, I want to go home. My books on rituals are waiting for me, and then I stopped myself from saying, no, don't stop for gas. And then we stopped for gas, and before I noticed, it was just gone. So sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's not, but soft vigilance is what it helps. One moment after the other. We stopped for gas, and before I noticed it was done. The activity was over, and we kept driving home. That's what I said.
Yeah.
Just soft vigilance, like having a companion observing all the choices that are available to you at every moment. That's what I understand as soft vigilance. Without punishing myself because wanted to go home and not fill the gas tank, without punishing myself because this morning I felt like it was raining, I felt like sleeping late instead of driving and see my mom as I always do on Sundays. Just soft vigilance. Seeing there is a poem that a friend of mine likes, the soft animal of our body, observing the soft animal of our body, looking for what it wants, and then making a choice of going in that direction or not. Honoring the reality of the village of me, as Clayton would say.
Okay, so I've heard that this soft vigilance technique is the one that you've adopted is very useful for you in choosing the decisions to be the person you want to be, and connected to the poem and Thomas's vigilance for himself to always do what he needs to do instead of leaving it for a day. So yeah, did I miss anything?
Do you have any questions?
I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to know, I agree that all of the things that you said, I understand that those decisions that you're making to be that of a good person's, but I would like to know what you think it means to be a good person. Why is it that gossiping is bad, or leaving things, for the next day is a bad thing? I mean, it's easy to say subjectively, but where do you draw the line in those things? Which is the me in the village that you really want to be?
Well, never thought of that, but in this context, why create suffering? Why not foster connection or flow or communion? And in very simple things, like allowing Tom to stop for gas if that's what he feels like doing, or honoring my mom's desire that I know she likes to see me often and she's used to see me on Sundays. So if you're asking me what is to be a better person, is to foster love and connection.
I like that a lot. Oh, sorry, that's my bad. I want to. So I heard.
Explain why is your bad.
In mindful conversations, giving feedback or my opinion is breaking the core idea of it. So I apologize for that. That's my bad.
Iris, so some things that do you feel heard?
I feel heard, and also I feel like breaking the dynamic of mindful conversation, because we're just going to do one round. But if we do the second round, and instead of me being the speaker is Daniel, I would ask him that being today present with us on a Sunday afternoon when his friends are all around on vacation, enjoying the summer, is an act of love, calling the aunt and the uncle to be with us to record a mindful conversation. That's to be a better person. You're giving me an example, Daniel, of what I just said.
You just get it done. I mean, from my perspective as an observer, Iris, I saw that you began speaking in a very energetic manner, leaning forward. Okay, so really kind of approaching the conversation, using your hands quite a bit to make points or emphasis as you were talking. One thing that kind of caught my attention, that when you were talking more on the theory side of things, of was it Ellen Langer? Is that the name? Okay. I mean, you were looking kind of straight up, and you can tell that there was theory behind it. But when you spoke from the heart, from the moment of truth, your eyes always kind of went up and to the left. So that was something that I kind of noticed at that time. And but yeah, but that was kind of the leaning forward, to the looking up to the left, and to using your hands to make emphasis. At some point, I felt that, okay, Iris is going into the theory. Okay, we're not here to kind of explain theory. We want to learn about what she feels about being a better person. But I think Danny asked the listener, kind of brought her back to what the ultimate question was to that.
Yeah, I noticed that. It's just that because we are recording and this is hopefully going to be seen by others, if I mentioned the source of the concept, soft vigilance, people can just Google it and benefit like we do from that powerful way of seeing mindfulness in practice that Helen Langer calls soft vigilance.
I mean, from what I gathered, I mean, definitely the soft vigilance is a very interesting concept. But I think the story that you shared with us today is kind of being aware of yourself. And as you talk about Clayton, okay, here's A and B. Let me, instead of A, what I normally do, let me choose B. And then there are always the other things. And you're right. I mean, in my case, why should I wait till tomorrow and then go all crazy when the light in my car turns on? I have to put gas in. I have time. Let me take care of it now, so I don't have to worry about that tomorrow. And that's just kind of basically being aware of the here and now, and being, I think being a better person is to avoiding situations that I would normally fall into by becoming aware about having that soft vigilance present.
Daniel, what is the summary for you today vis-a-vis this question? Because Thomas already offered his. To be a good person.
I think both of you framed it in slightly different ways, but are both powerful ways of looking at the problem. So I think what you said, Iris, was the most important thing of being a better person was, reducing the suffering of the people around you, or, increasing the love, something in that sense. And I completely agree with that. And I think what Thomas just said was a great strategy for becoming a better person is becoming aware of the pitfalls that everybody falls into, the mistakes that we live over and over again. So using that way of looking at how to be a better person, using that reference as to probe your own mind and see which ways am I going wrong to try to become a better person is very powerful. So I would agree with both of those. And I would like to add that I think that those are two powerful techniques to becoming better people, but that doesn't exactly say what a better person is, because if no other humans existed, then your way of being a better person, Iris, wouldn't really exist, right? Because what is a better person if there's in a vacuum? And for Thomas, like sometimes you may do the same thing over and over again, but it's not the wrong thing to do. So I would say being a better person is reducing the suffering that you live yourself. I think that's how I would sum it up.
Okay, so we gave in 10 minutes, I hope it was 10 minutes, Thomas, a demonstration of a mindful conversation, which is basically a dialogue, as we say in the recording, a dialogue which is different from a regular discussion or a deliberation or a debate. A dialogue where there is one, equality, everybody's equal in the conversation. Second, there is empathic listening. We listen to each other. And third, we keep talking, trying to unearth, to discover assumptions in the conversation. So I learned, and I think Daniel learned, and Thomas learned something new about our commitment to be better people. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share, that the mindful conversation is a powerful ritual to help us implement the R.E.A.L method, meaning to help us cultivate wisdom, to help us pursue liminality. And there are many other tools that I will be presenting in this series, some of which we have included in the fundamentals program of the Wisdom Project, and some of which are new. So if you want to start tomorrow after you listen to this presentation, if you want to start practicing mindful conversation, remember, 1, it's not a debate. You don't have to make your point and convince everybody else. 2, it's not a discussion where you present and people ask questions. 3, it's not a deliberation where you are trying to solve a problem and people are giving you inputs. No, it's a dialogue. It's an act of empathic listening where everybody is equal and you are just unearthing, discovering assumptions that were not there at the beginning. And I like the name that Tanya Singer gave it, meditating together, because it feels, and say yes or no if I'm wrong, that we are meditating together. And that symbolic meaning of meditating together is what makes it a ritual. All right, so any final thought, Daniel, Thomas? This is what I had for today regarding the R of the R.E.A.L method. And in the next episode, I will cover a little more of the artificial. The next presentation is called Tools Are Us, because the idea is that we have incorporated so many tools from our culture that if we want to develop any new skill, we just have to cultivate new tools, like Daniel is doing with his new workout ritual every morning. Okay, thank you very much. I'll see you in a week.